Hi, welcome to Getting Started with Neurographica. This is a class that I designed to walk you through the basic steps of the most basic starting algorithm to get you in touch with what Neurographica is and give you a very basic understanding of how it works. So welcome, and let's get started. I want to tell you just a little bit before we start drawing. I want to tell you a little bit about what Neurographica is. You've probably seen it online. Instagram and Facebook are kind of covered with it these days. At least my Instagram and Facebook are. And you've possibly stumbled across it, and maybe that is why you're here. So what is Neurographica? Neuro refers to our nervous system, to our neural connections inside our body. Graphica, standing for a graphical representation of those neurons. So that's where the name comes from. It is the creation of Pavel Piskarev, who is a man in Russia with many talents. He came up with Neurographica in 2014, and it has just blossomed since that time and is growing worldwide, being taught in many countries, all over the country, or all over the world. And a little bit, it's still fairly new, at least at the time of this recording, fairly new in the US, has only been here for a few years and is just starting to catch on. Neurographica is based on science. Pavel Piskarev pulled together many disciplines that have many theories that have been active for years and years. You may in particular recognize some of the language from Carl Jung, and of course, I already referred to neuroplasticity, but there are many others going way back. If you get interested, you can do some more research on that. My personal understanding, my personal philosophy of the way we operate as humans is that when we're born, we have a full connection to our intuition and to what's happening around us, and we utilize our body and all of our senses to make that connection. As we get older in the Western world, our education tends to systematically remove us or separate us from our intuition, encouraging, eventually forcing even us to use our brains, to use our egos to try to figure out the answers and solutions to things. Neurographica is a way to reconnect ourselves with that inner knowing, with our soul, with our other senses in the world. And I found it to be incredibly effective at doing that for me personally and for people that I've worked with. The other thing that I think is important to recognize about humans is that humans live in patterns. So if you think about the way we live our lives, every new thing we do has a learning curve. And as we get better at it, we figure out in our brain, this is the way we do this. And then we don't have to think so hard about it. So take, for example, driving. When you learn to drive, the first time you do it, there's a lot of things to think about, mirrors and gears and all those exciting things. And it takes a lot of concentration. Eventually, you're able to drive, and most of us have probably had the experience where we drove somewhere very familiar and we don't even remember the trip. That doesn't mean we didn't follow the rules of the road to get there and drive safely, but driving has become such an unconscious effort that it's easy to do and doesn't take a lot of thought. And that's because we've developed a pattern teaching us how to drive. So think about tying your shoes. Another example, very difficult to do when you first learn to do it. And now you do it without thinking about any of the steps. So we as humans try to develop a pattern for anything we're learning. And we do that because it's then easier to do it the next time. And we take those patterns and apply them to the next thing we do as often as we can. So when we develop a pattern, it can go into our subconscious and we don't have to worry about it anymore, and we can move forward. One of the examples that I like for that is an exercise class, and I've had this happen a few times with different instructors, where they will suggest that you walk backwards. You can't make mistakes when you walk backwards, but many of us walking forwards have our various idiosyncrasies that cause different problems in our body. So again, that's an example of when we do something that requires us to think a little bit, walking backwards, that we don't do naturally or frequently. We apply thoughts to it, we don't apply a pattern, and then we're able to do it successfully and in the best way. So Neurographica, in large part, breaks the patterns that we have established for ourselves that sometimes, frequently, get in the way of us seeing the biggest picture, all the options available to us. And that is a large part of what we're doing when we do Neurographica. All right, I would like to go through a couple of things you may or may not be familiar with if you've already explored my website a little bit. There are two concepts that make it that you need to understand in order to draw Neurographica, and I will demonstrate those for you in case you haven't seen the videos on my website. The first is what a neurographic line is. So a neurographic line is not straight, and it is not a pattern that repeats itself over and over again. It's not predictable. A neurographic line is organic. That is to say, it goes the way it wants to go. And it is not sharp. And in the case of Neurographic, it goes from one edge of the page to the other edge of the page, which I guess I didn't do here. On my website, I have a picture of clouds. Some people find it useful to print that out and trace the clouds just as a way to practice making lines like this. Another thing with neurographic lines is that we often want to, in fighting that pattern, those patterns we've established, if you sort of have the inclination to go up, sometimes making yourself go down or go right when your body says to go left, just again helps break patterns and stretch us a little bit. So that's one concept you'll need to understand and that we will be doing more of, and I'll be talking about as we go forward. The second concept is rounding. So as we draw lines on our drawing, they are going to cross each other as we move forward. So let me get a couple of lines in here. So here's two lines that cross, and each of those lines create a V. You can see that, right? Make sure, yep, see that right there. And those are sharp, and we are going to round those lines. And the way I like to do that, and that actually works better with a slightly bigger marker, which is what I typically draw with. And so the way I like to do that is I go down and I just, instead of going down into that corner and making a sharp turn back up, I just curve my way up and go back and color in the part that didn't get colored. So again, I go around like that and just color that little spot back in and around like that. And again, until what I've created is very gentle. And you'll notice after a few minutes, after you've done that in several places, that originally this line went this way and this line went this way. But now, if this were a road map, you see that you can go very easily here and then turn up or go down. And it doesn't really matter. Each direction is equally easy. So that's another piece of what we're doing when we're rounding the lines. And again, we'll talk about that just a little bit more as we're doing our drawing. So that is, now, another thing that I want to explain to you that I think is another important characteristic of Neurographica, and I may say this differently than some other teachers. Neurographica is not an art practice. You can make neurographic art, and that's perfectly fine. Many people do it. But what we are going to learn is Neurographica, which is a practice that follows specific steps, giving you access to your subconscious and bringing that wisdom back to your conscious mind, reconnecting you with that. And so what that means is that the change that is occurring is inside of you. It is not on the paper. So your paper may be beautiful when you're done or less than beautiful when you're done, but it's not an artwork in the way I typically think of an artwork, which is something pretty that I want to put on my wall when I'm done. It is a reflection of what I'm trying to change, the inner growth I'm experiencing, and that is its intention. I want to show you then, explain one more piece. And that is that because with Neurographica, the purpose is to reconnect with our inner sense. We are going to stop in the middle of our drawing process. And in this case, I'm going to do it 3 times with you to reflect on how we feel, what we're thinking, what our emotions are, if we're having any bodily changes. And that's an important part of Neurographica, because that is when you are consciously aware of what might be changing inside of you. At the beginning, it's a little bit awkward, but eventually you're creating a pattern, retraining yourself to pay attention to your body. So we'll be doing that as we go forward. I'll be demonstrating that with you. All right, so let us get started. The first thing that I do when I do a drawing is I turn my paper over. So this is the back side of what I'm going to draw on. And you don't have to do any of this if you don't want to, but I'm showing you how I do it. I put the date. I put the kind of algorithm we're doing. We're doing today what's called an ARL, algorithm for removing limitations. I'll tell you just a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I make a note if I'm drawing with someone or on my own. So in this case, I'm writing that I'm doing the class, getting started with Neurographica. And then I always write my topic, and we're going to talk about the topic in just a minute. My topic is going to be marketing WendingPath, which I find to be challenging. And then the next piece that I like to do on the back is I make notes on my reflection process. I treat Neurographica very much like journaling. So I will have quite a few notes on the back of my paper when I'm done. So I make this little grid, and hopefully you can see this, but 4 columns: when, the image, the emotions, and the body sensations. And then when I fill in this little table, I will write what process in the drawing I'm in the middle of, when I did it, and then my notes. So I'll refer to this again in a few minutes when we're ready to do it. But I'm going to stop us in our drawing after the rounding process, after we've drawn our lines, and after coloring, and each time encourage you to make these notes for yourself. Just remind you that with anything new, it's always a little bit awkward at first. It's hard to think about these things. These are new things to think about, and it feels a little bit strange, but it's a matter of developing a practice. So I would encourage you to go ahead and do this part, even if it feels a little strange. All right, we're going to turn our papers over. And the first step for any drawing is to come up with a topic. And as I said, a minute ago, the topic I'm planning to do is marketing, and I always note it on the back. And what I want to do to guide you in your topic is you are encouraged for your topics to be not too specific. And the main concern with that is that you put your solution in the topic, which then closes your mind off to solutions you haven't thought of yet. So for example, I could have made my topic, I hate Instagram, or I don't want to learn Instagram. And in fact, I put Instagram first as my topic, but I switched it to marketing because that's a broader topic. Marketing is a challenge for me, and I'm learning a lot about it. And so it seems like an appropriate topic for me to work on and show you how this process works. You want to make it as broad as you possibly can to encompass solutions that will come in that you hadn't thought of before. All right, so I've come up with my topic, marketing, and I've written it on the back. And now I am ready to do my first step. Now, because this is an ARL, algorithm for removing limitations, the next step that we do is what I call scribbling. It's a cathartic moment where I take my emotional attachment to this issue and take that sensation from wherever I feel it in my body. And again, the first time you're doing this, you may not feel it at all in your body, but right now I can feel it between my shoulder blades. And I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to consciously pay attention to that. It feels like kind of a lump there, and try to move that lump into my dominant hand. And as soon as I've done that, I'm going to look at my paper, and I'm going to do what I call a scribble. It takes anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds. It's very quick, and it should be highly energetic. And so here's an example of me. This is me doing that. Okay. Okay, and so it's just that quick, and it's just that easy. So I will, you may need to pause the video to do that yourself, but you're just giving yourself a minute to focus on the topic and get that scribble down. All right, as soon as we've done that, this is our catharsis. This is a image that represents that tension, problem, issue that we're carrying inside of us. And it speaks to our subconscious, even if it doesn't make any sense to us on a conscious level. So our task now is to round what we've created. Now, I always do my catharsis with a ballpoint pen, because if I use a marker, the marker's head gets damaged with the energy of the catharsis. So I'm now going to switch to my trusty 1.5 Pitt pen, but you get whatever you prefer to write with, or whatever you've brought. See if I can fix that shadow for you. And I will show you how we're going to round. So we're going to round the circles or the intersections that we've created here. And the way I like to do that, since this is one shape, I'm just going to trace this shape with my bigger marker and go around like that. And then I color in the leftover, which is up here too. And so I'm just going to repeat that. I'm going to do that in each of my blobs. I guess they're not really circles. And here, you want to make that nice and round. And here. So in Neurographica, an intersection or a point or a V where these things come together represents tension or conflict or strong emotion of some kind, anger. And so we are trying to soften the edges of that a little bit and helping us feel calmer and more content with where we are and what we're doing. So trying to take a little bit of that high emotion out of our system as best we can. So in this case, you can see I'm not really drawing organic lines. I'm tracing what I started, but you can also, as you're tracing these lines, you can also make them a little bit more organic and less straight. I scribble straight and kind of dance them up and down. That's a little bit less important at this stage. Can't tell if those look like tails that didn't quite touch. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in as if they were touching. So this is a very intuitive practice. If you decide you need to add a line like I just did, that's totally fine. I'm going to leave that tail for a minute and show you what we do with that when we're done. So I'm nearly done here. Rounding my catharsis or scribble, as I like to call it. And if you haven't quite caught up with me and you'd like to pause the video, this would be a good time to do that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take probably two, you may have more tails. Our tails are where we started and ended our drawing. And so they're just stuck out there. And if you'll remember, I said that lines in Neurographica always go to the edge of the page. So I'm going to make that a little more organic and just follow that tail to the edge of the page. And I'm going to do that with this one as well. Okay. And the next thing, you should round anything you created with that. If you created any additional intersections at that point, like this line came over here, so I created another little intersection there. All right. And I don't have any good examples on my paper here. Well, this is an example. If you have lines that get very close together and you don't feel good about this rounding, you can also just color that in, and that's fine too. And if you have little tiny pieces, I probably had one, I didn't even say it out loud when I was doing it, but something like that, you can just color that in as well. Okay, once we've gotten our tails connected, we then want to connect some of these loops. And I want to give you an example of how we create patterns and how they get us stuck. So in my pattern, at some point I came down here and then I didn't finish. I didn't go the logical direction, the way we think about if we were driving down a road. I did it almost 360-degree turn and went back this way very sharply. And I did that here in several places. Again, that's a representation of how I feel about this topic and where I am, but it's also a pattern I get stuck in. So I'm going to give myself some other alternatives, and I'm going to do that by just taking the edge of that line another direction, in this case to the edge of the page. And I'm going to do that with the other side of this loop as well. Let's see where this one wants to go. And once I do that, I just quickly go in and round it. Okay, here's another one that's kind of pointy, and I'm going to take that point and I'm going to take it all the way to the edge. And I'm going to take this pointy one and I'm going to see where it wants to go. So by doing this, even now, even with just, I don't know how many lines I've added beyond my initial scribbling, but just a few, I've already said to myself, you don't have to live in this pattern. You can stretch yourself out. There are other choices. There are always choices. When you get here, it's okay to go this way, but you can also go this way or this way. And so we're saying that with each area of conflict or high tension. So here's another one. And I'm just going to round that out a little bit more so it's not so pointy. And here's another one. It's kind of gotten in the middle of this other loop, but I'm going to take this line here and this line this way. And now I've got kind of a tangled mess of lines here. So I'm going to round all of those. Okay. Now that makes kind of a big blob, but that's fine. And it's not, everything is rounded. I haven't created any additional pointed parts or intersections or areas of conflict. Okay, I see a couple more of these. I see one here where it's kind of pointing out, and here. I'm going to do this and this. Okay, and then I'm going to do this one, round that to the edge. All right, so now I believe I've finished my tails and I've taken all my pointed edges. I guess I could do this one too. If I wanted. All right, let me do that. This one. Okay. So now is where we get to the point, as soon as I get this rounded off. And if you're not quite done, again, pause the video anytime and get caught up. All right, as soon as I get these rounded, then what I'm going to do is begin adding my organic lines. Now, this is, again, an intuitive process where we decide where we want to add. Oops, I just found one I didn't round. Always doing that. This is an intuitive process where we add lines as we think we need them. But at the beginning, again, that can be a little bit tricky. And so what I would suggest is looking for large spaces and breaking them in two. So what I mean by that is, here I've got a great big space, but great big white space with no lines in it. So I'm going to break that right down the middle, and then I'm going to see where this line takes me. Where does it want to go? All the way through here. All right. And then I'm going to round this one off. Now, some people like to wait and do several lines and then round it, and that's fine too. Other people like to round as they go. Either is perfectly acceptable. The only concern with waiting to round is if you start feeling unwell, anxious, dizzy, uncomfortable, that may mean you've introduced too much tension, too much energy into your body right now. And the best way to calm that back down is to go ahead and round out those intersections. So I find it's easier, for me, it's easier to find all the intersections if I just round as I go. All right, so again, I'm going to look for a nice big space. This looks to me like the biggest space on my drawing. So I'm going to go right in the middle of this. And again, I'm going to draw a neurographic line, which is very wiggly, like the outline of our clouds or a river or something else organic, much less like a map of roads like our first drawing looked like. And I want to show you that on these roundings that I'm doing, I'm making nice juicy roundings. So even though the rounding itself is right in here, I'm going way past that and kind of filling it in. I'm doing that for a couple reasons. One reason is that I want the rounding to look natural. I want, when this picture is done, when this image in my mind is clear, I want it to be smooth and continuous, and for the each of these intersections to be a natural movement into any other direction. The second reason I'm doing it is that lines represent thoughts, ideas that we have, and we are introducing alternative ideas to our subconscious right now. And so I trace over the lines, sometimes a little bit, because I'm just reinforcing that inside of my brain that this choice is okay. This is another option you have forgotten about in the past, and I want to show this option to you. And again, I'm going to do just a few more lines, but here's another great big space. I want to break up these big spaces, and you can break it up and stop. I could just stop right there if I wanted, or if I feel like I need to, I can keep going. I tend to do a lot of lines on my drawing. That's me. That gives me a lot of time when I'm not jabbering at you to think about my topic, think about what I'm doing, and gives me some time to reflect. That's just kind of my process, but we each have our own process. Typically at the very beginning, people don't draw as many lines. It takes longer. People get impatient, and also you get so much out of each drawing that you don't necessarily need to draw a whole lot of lines. But again, as you move on, you'll experiment with each of these things and see what works for you. That's what's important, is what makes that shift inside of you. All right, I still see a couple of really big spaces, which are going to give me a little bit of trouble or when I'm coloring. So I'm just going to fill those in. So here's one more. Okay, that might be enough. So again, you'll decide when you're done with when you feel like you've done enough, you'll decide, and that's fine. When it's good for you, it's good. This is your process. This is your work inside. And it has to work for you. So when you get to the point that you have added all the lines you want to add, and you can always add more later if you want, but when you get to that point and you feel like you've rounded it all, then we are ready for our next step. And before we do that, we are going to do a reflection. I think I said that a little differently than I had intended to, but that's what we're going to do now. So this is technically after we've added the lines. I skipped the after rounding one. So in my little table on the back, we've added the lines. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to picture in my mind and see if there's an image around my mark, well, at all, an image in my mind. Okay, and I've got an image of a large rock. And my breathing is a little bit shallow. And I feel a little bit frustrated about this topic. I'm 62 and I don't want to learn any more software, but that's what you get. So there you are. So I put those down there. Again, at this stage, that probably means very little to you, but eventually it helps you connect. All right, so here's my picture. I'm done with my reflection and I'm ready to start coloring. So I just want to, let me show you this drawing again for a minute and talk about it just for a minute. So kind of show you what we've changed. When I think about marketing, I did that scribble, and that's how I feel about it. I have now said to myself, when I get here, I don't have to, well, it's hard to see what the original lines were, but this is probably one of them. When I'm here, I don't necessarily have to go here and then whip around to here. I've got alternate choices. And so by adding those choices, it's a real graphic way of thinking outside the box, of thinking differently than what comes naturally. So that's kind of graphically what we're doing here. That now coloring. All right, I prefer to work with colored pencils. Some people like to use markers. Highlighters are also popular. Markers are fine if they don't smear your black lines, and if they're not so dark that some kind of markers will literally cover the black. You don't want that. You want the black to show through. These black lines are our thoughts, and we need them to be present through the whole process. In terms of picking colors, that's completely individual. And a lot of times at the beginning, people will just do it randomly, do what, close their eyes and pick a color, and that's fine. As you move forward in Neurographica, I would encourage you to learn more about colors and think about what each color means to you. Maybe make yourself a little chart about what each color means to you, and then you can be more deliberate about what emotions you want to bring to your drawing. The colors on our drawing represent emotions. So I am bringing some purple emotions to my drawing here. Sure, it looks purple on the screen. Good, it does. Okay, at least on my screen. All right, so rules of coloring. There aren't too many rules about coloring. First, anything you color needs to be at least in groups of two. So if I color one thing purple, I need to color at least one other shape purple next to it. At least one. Can do more than that, as I've done, but at least one. Second recommendation is that we limit the number of colors that we put down to just a few, depending on the size of your drawing. So with a drawing this size, this is a regular copy size piece of paper, 8.5 by 11. So I would say 3 to 5 colors would be enough. Also, it kind of matters. Well, you're more inclined to add more colors if you add more lines, just because there's a lot more spaces to color. So there's that. And the other thing I've learned with coloring is if you are an artistic person, you like to color, you like to make art, you like to be creative, you may well be inclined to make your picture pretty in whatever that means to you and to work on it that way. And that is completely fine. I would recommend, this is my recommendation based on experience. I would recommend you wait until we go through all the steps before you work on making it pretty. And at first, you just color very lightly in each square that you want to color in and save the shading for afterwards, because we are going to draw more lines. And sometimes you can spend hours fixing something up and then find you have to draw a line right over the top of it. And that can be very frustrating, and I speak from experience. Let's see. The other thing about coloring is each little shape blob is one color, or as opposed to, say, if I wanted this to be both purple and red, half of it purple and half of it red. We don't want to go half and half. We want to pick a color for each shape and stick with that color. However, the sort of exception to that is I can't do red next to purple, but I can decide that this is kind of a river of red and a river of purple, which is what it was in my mind. And let's say I decide that this is also going to be red. And as I do that, I could also say this red goes right here, just like this purple, and I can color red right across the top of the purple. That is allowed. Okay. So the meaning of colors, there are so many philosophies of colors and what they mean. And each of them is fine. And each of them is in the eye of the artist. So you should decide what red means to you and use red when you want to inject that emotion into your drawing. The system that Neurographica often teaches is Wuxing, which is an ancient Asian tradition, Chinese, I think, that encompasses colors, but it also encompasses many, many, many more things, and is very complicated and wonderful and powerful, and has been around a long time. But not, in my case, for example, not particularly meaningful because it's not something I've ever spent much time studying outside of my classes in Neurographica. I have spent more time with the chakra colors and what they mean. And so that system is a little closer to me, and it's okay to use that system. It's also okay to use your own intuitive sense of what red means to you. So in Wuxing, red would be action and fire and passion. And in chakra colors, it's your base core needs. And in American culture, it's Valentine's Day and love. So you get to pick, and it doesn't have to be any of those three. It can be whatever you want it to be. Well, let's see. I forgot to tell you that white is a color. White is a color in Neurographica, and it represents the unknown. So you are welcome to leave shapes white if you choose to. And the white shapes follow all the same rules that the colorful shapes follow. So if you want to leave this white, you need to also leave the one next to it white. And that's fine. At the beginning, when we're first drawing Neurographica, people often try to find images in the things that they've colored and drawn. You know, do you see whatever, a duck or a face or a heart? A heart is very common. And generally, the Neurographica experts would tell you to avoid doing that because you're assigning a meaning to your drawing that wasn't the intention. It was supposed to be abstract. It's supposed to be about the lines. and the emotions. So that's your call. Certainly plenty of people use Neurographica as a base for neuro art, and then do often turn it into something. And then there are some other algorithms that we learn if you pursue this, that start out with very specific shapes. And people like to do fun things like, hearts for Valentine's Day or bunnies for Easter or things like that. Oh, Chinese New Year, I think we just did the dragon, so that's pretty common to do something with a dragon. So Neurographica, just like most things in the world, has lots of rules and lots of times that we break the rules. This algorithm, as I said, is the algorithm for removing limitations. And the idea is that we have these patterns we're stuck in that create limitations or blocks within us, make it hard for us to see things that are right in front of us, that obvious other choices or ways of doing things. And so this algorithm focuses on trying to remove those. Let's see. And so what I want to say about that is that there are lots and lots and lots and lots of other, I just got myself in trouble. Lots of other algorithms that we will be exploring in the drawing circle if you want to participate in that, and some of the other classes. All right, I just set up a problem. I'm going to show you the solution. I colored that purple. I don't want to color this purple. Then I colored that purple. So I am going to have to draw another line to leave some things white and some things purple. And yes, I'm allowed to do that. It's another thing you're allowed to do. All right, so each of these steps, as I said, each of these steps is taking us deeper into our subconscious. The order of the steps is intentional to take us in a very specific, clear direction through our subconscious layers. Oh, I'm about to set myself up again. I guess I better color both of these red. Okay. Well, if red means action, I think it's telling me I better get on the stick with marketing. So there we go. I left this one blank too. Too bad you can't talk back to me here. I expect you already noticed that I left this one blank. All right, so I did the same thing here. I just divided that space in two, rounded my new lines into place, and that ended up putting the two white spaces together. All right. I think I am done, I think, except for this. I'm going to color. So when are you done? You're done when you feel like you're done. You're done when the amount of white space is the amount of unknown you want to leave on your drawing, if any. Again, this is a very intuitive process. There are some very specific steps that you need to follow. But it's also about getting in touch with your intuition. And if your intuition says you're done, you're done. So I've got two white spaces together, two white spaces, 2, 3, and 2. So I'm good with that. And I think all my other colors are touching. And it's okay that I just have the one red purple. I don't need to do two of those because technically that is both a red and a purple in Neurographica speak. All right, and I'm just rounding a little bit more because that's what I do. So the more you round, the more you take tension out of your topic. And in this particular topic, I would just as soon have no tension. I would like to make this easy. So you do it like that as much as you want. Sometimes people like to go back to drawings and round them just a little bit more if the topic is still bothering you, and that's okay. You can do that. Okay, all right, making myself stop here. All right, we're going to stop at this point and do a reflection. Again, that's the piece on the back where we think about what we see in our mind's eye, what our emotions are, and what our bodily sensations are. So I've already noted that I'm doing this after the coloring process. Think about what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some kind of movement, some kind of forward movement. I feel calm and my breathing is better. Didn't do a very good job of keeping a line between each thing here. Slight headache. Okay. All right. So now you can do this reflection process. When I was in school, we had to do it after 8 times during every drawing. And you can do that. So I would encourage you to do it at least 3 times. Pick ahead. And again, at first you're just doing it. You're just writing it down, whatever comes to you. Eventually it will start to have some meaning. Okay, so back to my coloring. The next thing we are going to do is what are called universal lines. Universal lines are, this is personal for you, for what your own personal philosophy is. Universal lines represent the energy in the universe that is not our personal energy. It is the energy, if you have a religious belief, you might call it God or source. You know, science, electrical energy that's already in the atmosphere, whatever you're comfortable with. But it's the representation that we're not empty beings in a void that make our choices all on our own. There is all kinds of energy around us, and so this represents the universal energy that supports and guides us somewhat as we're moving forward. So these lines will be thicker than your other lines. And when I say thicker, I mean noticeably thicker. You should be able to look at it and somebody's drawing and very clearly say, oh, I see you have 3 universal lines on there. So they're not they're not just a little bit thicker. They really need to stand out. These lines will go just like the other ones from one edge to the other to another. They can follow lines you've already drawn or be entirely new. And what else do I want to tell you? They are organic lines, as the other ones that we've drawn, the little wiggly ones. They're not quite, typically, they're not quite as up and down as some of these other lines, just a little bit more wavy, but they should have at least some movement to them. So they're not straight. All right, so let me draw this here. This. So sometimes they're going to line up with another line and sometimes not. All right. So now I'm using a very thick marker now. As you can see, that line is already thicker than the other one. I am going to go right next to the line I already created, even with this thick marker, and do it again. Because again, at the end, these lines are much more powerful than mine. These thoughts are, this energy is more powerful than my energy. And I want to represent that on the page. All right, let's see here. So now you may be able to see why I said don't spend a lot of time shading before you do this, because if I had shaded a bunch of these shapes, I'd be drawing lines right over some of the shading, and that can be frustrating. Okay, and those two look thicker. On a paper this size, again, it's an intuitive practice. It's what feels right to you. I feel like I need a third line. I've seen people have as many as 5 on a paper this size. Smaller would be less. And if you're in a hurry, you can always do this exact same exercise on a quarter size sheet of paper. Just cut your paper in quarters, obviously, and you'll get it done more quickly. And in that case, you probably just have 1 or 2 universal lines. All right, now, bet you're not surprised to hear that the next thing is we have to round them. And this is where juicy roundings really come into play. You want it to very much look like these big, thick field lines came in. There we go. Came in naturally. They look like they fit. So when you step back, it's just very natural going from this thick line to this thinner line. Let's see. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. There we go. All right, so we're going to round all these into place. This energy, as we get increasingly in touch with our inner selves and shut down our ego a little bit, these sources of energy, these universal lines, can be quite significant in helping propel us forward on our journey. Okay. And this one. The other thing that happens if you have already done shading is, at least happened for me, is I didn't even want to round because it was covering up even more of my coloring, my beautiful coloring work. So I save all the decorative stuff for after I get through the hard stuff or the meaningful stuff, depending on how you look at it. All right. All right, we just have 2 more steps to go after this. We are very close, other than if you want to pretty your picture up, and that's fine if you do. So like I said, you can always add more lines. You can always go back and round more fully or just where you missed, to re-energize, reignite, I guess I should say, the energy in this picture back for yourself. That's always fine to do. You know, this is bothering me a little bit, the way that's kind of sticking out like that. I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna round that. Just looked weird to me the way that was standing out, so I'm gonna do this. And that green. Okay, now we've got our universal lines. Good. We look at them, they're obvious, and they stand out, so that's great. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we've done a lot of work in our subconscious, even if it doesn't feel like it. We've done a lot of work in our subconscious. And we are now looking for a solution to our problem. And solution is almost a tricky word because you won't necessarily get from the beginning to the end in one drawing if it's a bigger problem, but you ideally will move yourself forward, propel yourself in a forward direction. And so even if you are not consciously aware at this point of what your solution or information is, we still go ahead and do a solution circle. In this case, it's going to be a circle because these are early drawings, and we do everything. Circles represent unity and harmony and oneness, and we always do circles in the early days of Neurographica. So the way we find our solution circle is to look at our drawing and look for arcs that already exist. So I see an arc right here, almost goes all the way around. See an arc right there, and I see one right here. Oh, and a huge one here. So, and I say huge because it's just a little there, but it would go all the way like that. I'm going to go off the page, which is okay. Your solution can go off the page. Remembering that this is a snapshot of a bigger neurological system inside your whole body. So, so of course it can go off the page because this is not a frame that says this is the end of where you exist or where your neurons run. This is just a little close-up picture. I just can't stop rounding. I think, I feel, and again, this is intuitive, I feel like this is my circle. So I'm going to do this. So again, I'm going to take my big thick marker, and if you don't have one, you can just use your regular marker. You just have to draw several lines side by side. Now, you're okay. So I would just go ahead. You can see that it's already drawn here. I would just go ahead and fill this in like that. There we go. Now, this circle has to be even more pronounced than your lines. This is like your focal point of your art. So if you show your picture to a child, the child should see the circle first, then the thick lines, and then the rest of the drawing. So it should be that obvious. It's not like, is that your circle over there? It should be very obvious. Okay, so that's pretty thick. And now, of course, I'm going to round it into place with some big juicy roundings. Let's see, trying to anticipate questions based on my drawing. So this red is now on the outside of that circle, and this is on the inside. They're still touching. Nothing needs to be done about that. You don't need to add another red on the inside of the circle. Same with this white. It's all good. Oops. So this video I'm offering to you as an introduction to Neurographica. I hope got a lot out of it. I'll summarize here in a minute because we're almost done. Okay, I think I got that rounded into place. All right, one more thing. Okay, so again, I said I want the circle to stand out as more than anything else, and you can do that in a variety of ways. This it pretty much already is in my case anyway is thick enough that it stands out. Some people like to color the inside of the circle all one color, one emotion, whatever color is dominating the circle. I don't know if that's red or green in this case. Some people just like to shade it a little bit, highlight the edges a little bit. You can do that. Whatever works for you. But I'll leave that to you. But what you want is you don't want a situation where if somebody looked at it, they wouldn't be able to tell which were the field lines and they wouldn't be able to tell what was the solution circle. Not that they would know what to call it, but they ought to be able to see those things. They ought to stand out. So that is that. Now, the last thing, and maybe the most important thing to do after you've gotten your drawing to this point, you're welcome to do more to it, shade it, whatever you want to do. I'm not going to do any of that on camera today. But the last thing that you want to do is take a few minutes to reflect on any thoughts that came to you about your topic, how you have moved forward, how your thinking might have changed. And I treat this like a journaling exercise. I will sit and write sometimes a couple of paragraphs. It depends on how much I've learned and what the topic is on the back of my paper. And sometimes, it's not so much. The other thing that is useful is if this is a topic that you are going to draw on more than one time, this would be a good time to stop and think, how would I rephrase the topic to incorporate what I've learned in my next drawing? So maybe in my case, it's resisting marketing, or maybe in my case, it's next steps. So that's kind of what you want to do next, and how to really get the most out of the drawing. It is also very common, because this is doing so much work inside of you on your neurons and the whole idea of neuroplasticity, you will often not fully understand what you've learned until the next day, until you've slept on it. So it is also recommended for you to look at your picture the next day, and maybe you have some additional information you want to jot on the back. Some people like to take their picture and have a place for their latest picture, the fridge, wherever you see commonly, just to remind yourself to think about it a little bit. One of the things with neuroplasticity is that we change where we give attention. So if you focus on the positive information you gain from your drawing process, acknowledge to yourself when you do something that's moving forward in that topic or that's outside of your normal pattern, you're giving weight and emphasis to that in your neural development. So that will help you significantly. Don't brush off your tiny victories. They're important. So that's it for the drawing. That's all there is. I would encourage you to do several of these. It's fine to do it on the same topic over and over until you feel like you've really moved. It is recommended that you don't do more than one topic a day, primarily because of that neuroplasticity. issue, just getting watered down, muddled, too much to process. I have classes on my website, WendingPath.com. I have some other videos. We have a drawing circle going now, at least now at the time that I'm recording this. I would so appreciate if you could pay me for this video by going to Facebook and liking WendingPath.com or following it or however you do that. And the same on Instagram, which I, as I said, don't understand yet, but I do have a channel. So just go like it. And anything you do like that is helpful to me because the numbers apparently are very important as I'm learning. And I'm always available over email, which you can reach me through the website, WendingPath.com, to answer questions, talk about drawings, talk about how you might want to use this. My passion with Neurographica is in coaching, and I would love to help you work on specific issues. This is an amazing coaching tool. The amount of progress a person can make on an issue with a handful of drawings, well, it's been astounding to me as I've worked with different people. I could not recommend it more highly. So I encourage you to think about all of those things, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you.